Welcome. We are live. Welcome to the first online Prisma Meetup. I'm your host, Daniel. And today we have a very interesting lineup of speakers with some really exciting topics. Because this is our first meetup, I'd like to welcome all of you. We're going to be hosting many more of these. And we want these to be a space where we talk about Prisma and also many related topics such as databases and everything related to the intersection between databases, Prisma, and application development. And so without any further delay, I'd like to invite Tammy Bryant, who's the principal site reliability engineer of Gremlin, and her talk title is Database Horror Stories. So before I bring her on stage, I'd like to introduce her. So Tammy is a principal site reliability engineer, as I mentioned, where she works on chaos engineering, the facilitation of controlled experiments to identify systemic weaknesses. Previously, she's led SRE teams at Dropbox, responsible for databases and storage systems used by over 500 million customers. And prior to this, she's worked at DigitalOcean and one of Australia's largest banks in security engineering, product engineering, and infrastructure engineering. So now I bring you Tammy. Tammy, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
So I'm going to bring your slide on stage. Is there anything else you would like to add before you get started?
Happy Halloween. It's great to be here. And if you have any questions, please just post them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. Thanks so much.
Great.
All right, are we ready?
Yes, we are. You're free to go.
Okay, perfect. Hey, everyone. So you can find me on Twitter, Tammy X Bryant, or you can drop me an email anytime, tammy@gremlin.com. So today I'm here to share some spooky database horror stories. I'm actually originally from Australia, so that's my accent. I live in the USA in Florida, the most Australian place that I could find in America. And yeah, I've been here for 6 years now. And like Daniel said, I previously worked at Dropbox leading the databases team there. So that was 500 petabytes of data across databases, Magic Pocket, block storage. And then also I was able to actually handle the load required to meet the needs of 500 million customers with my team. So that was really exciting. But also, I do have a lot of horror stories to share over the last few years. So what is a horror story? I think today we'll go with like the informal definition. So a distressing experience. Things that, you know, are just like, oh my goodness. I'm sure if you've ever been on call and you're watching today, you'll know what it feels like when you get a page or you see your metrics rising in a way that you don't want them to, or you see a ton of error messages getting posted to the logs. And you're like, this is definitely a distressing experience. Now we need to get on there and we need to be able to figure out what's wrong and how we can solve it. So it's definitely not fun. Thought it would be fun to also just get you to interact in the chat. So I'd love to hear what your favorite classic horror story is and why. So horror movie or just traditional story. Be fun to be able to hear that, and we can circle back and go into some of the details about why you like those stories so much. So now it's spooky database time. So the first story that I wanted to share with you is called The Dealer of Damage. So on a dark and stormy day, we started to see a rise in errors for the database. Things didn't seem cool at all. Something was definitely wrong, and we were all on edge wondering what was happening. Why were we seeing log messages just saying there's problems connecting to the database, problems customers can't reach the database? What's going on? We were digging into the metrics and the logs, and we saw that this distressing experience was being caused by specific types of queries. So if you've ever looked into databases or worked on a databases team, you'll see when you have your SQL queries coming to connect to your database, they'll be doing different types of things. So in this case, they were trying to load a specific page and be able to display specific items on that page. And we're just seeing a lot of those queries coming up over and over. And then there was a lot of folks trying to add data, but it looked like the same queries. So maybe you think you start to do some detective work during this horror scenario. So it's distressing already, but you have to be a detective at the same time. We're like, what kind of queries are they? Are they from one user? Is this a user that's doing something bad? Do we need to ban this user? That's something that you might want to do. If you see a lot of queries that are really bad from one user, you can actually have a temporary ban to stop that issue until you resolve it. Or maybe it was coming from one specific type of source. So that's what happened when we looked into these queries. We realized they were coming from one specific source. So if you have query metadata, which is super handy to have, you'll be able to quickly identify the source. So for example, even if you make it really simple and just have www and API as your two sources for types of queries, so people going to www or people using your API, another type we'd have would be desktop client, or you might have mobile app, mobile client. So we knew then, oh, okay, looks like it's a specific set of users, but also a specific type of source, the API. Then we're like, oh my goodness, our API is almost taking down our database. And this has happened to me at many places that I've worked, and I've seen it happen to tons of friends that have worked at different companies. So why might your API be taking down your database? There's a lot of things that can go wrong there, right? Maybe you have rate limiting, but maybe the rate limiting isn't good enough. Or maybe, it hasn't been implemented correctly. Maybe you need to revamp it and fix it. But also just being able to quickly understand what these queries are, what they're doing, who's sending the queries, who's creating the queries, what source they're coming from. It enables you to actually quickly diagnose and look into the issue and get it resolved. So what did we do? We laid down the hammer on the bad queries and the bad storm passed. So how do you lay down the hammer? A lot of the time, if you're in a situation where you've got, tens of thousands of databases, you need to be able to have automated tools to do that, to lay down that hammer. So we actually had built tools to be able to do this in these situations. So then we can reach out to people, we can reach out to other teams and understand, why is this downstream issue happening? Why is this system suddenly trying to overload the database? Let's keep everyone else's experience awesome while we fix the cause of this big problem. So that's the first story, the dealer of damage. If you've ever had this happen to you or you've experienced it yourself, please share in the chat. Love to know, but definitely happens a lot. Something to watch out for. The next one that I wanted to share is called Drop Dead. So this is another interesting horror story, probably one of the worst ever. Suddenly in the office, you could feel the pressure intensify. The air was cold. No one was moving. I could just tell that something was wrong. My job that day was to be on call and be able to understand if we needed to let customers know that something was wrong with the systems, something wasn't working right. And then I was supposed to help in war room situations to be able to guide the team to get to a resolution fast, to improve the mean time to resolution. Something was very, very wrong. You can just tell when something's gone really bad. I can always feel it in my bones, especially when you're in an office. It's a little bit harder now that we're all remote. Someone on our team had accidentally dropped the entire production database. Oh my goodness. Really bad situation. This is everyone's nightmare. When you think about this, I'd never seen this happen before, but obviously it's something that should not be able to happen, right? You should have protections in place to prevent anyone from being able to actually even do that. So it's not the person's fault that it happened. They did it by accident, but you just shouldn't even be able to do that at all. It's a really bad situation. How do you prevent that from happening? You can just put in controls that prevent people from being able to run drop database commands. So it's not even possible. But that definitely was a horror story situation. You can imagine we got into the room. We quickly understood what was happening. We were able to recover the database, but it was a tough situation for everybody involved. It really brought us together as a team, and we made sure that afterwards we put in place a lot of things to prevent that from happening again. Everyone's nightmare. The next story, Proxy Trap. In the middle of the night, an engineer would enter the office and code all night long, but nobody ever saw him or even knew what he looked like. They just knew that he wrote code, thousands and thousands of lines of code, and the systems that he built were critical for everyone to be able to use the service. But he would leave before everyone even arrived at the office. He didn't like working during the day. He was the biggest night owl I've ever heard of. Nobody understood what the code did though, and he was managing it and writing all the code himself. This is what can happen in small startups, right? But what did this mysterious code even do? How did it even work? To a lot of people, it was really spooky. Can you imagine being the engineer that has to go and modify this proxy code? Can you imagine having to actually try and test the code, to submit a PR, to understand what the code's doing when it's already massive and you've got no one that you can ask about it? It's actually a pretty difficult situation. Most folks didn't even want to touch that code. If you could work on a million other projects, why choose this one? Then something big happened. He decided to move on. So if he wasn't going to be at the company anymore, what were we going to do? And the proxy started to rumble. Lots of problems were occurring. We had to do something. The first thing that we tried to do was read all of the code. I actually printed out all of the code for this proxy so we could read it and understand it. That's something that I've always liked to do since like 2004. If I've got some really old legacy code, I just like to read it like a book. I definitely don't think that's what most people do, but I found that it really helps me a lot, be able to understand it, go through, take my own notes, understand what's actually going on with the code and why different failures might be occurring. The other thing that we realized was there was no monitoring for this proxy. We just knew that queries went in and queries came out, but we didn't know what was actually going on in the middle. This makes it a bit scary too, right? If some queries go in, how do you know that all the queries are coming out? How do you know that they're all coming out correctly? What is the proxy doing to the queries while it's handling them? So many questions come up when you think about a proxy. Is it modifying them? Does it have some protections in place? Is it preventing bad queries from passing through the proxy and hitting the database? Those are all the types of things that you wonder. So one thing we needed to do though was figure out how we could stop this proxy rumbling. We decided that we'd actually purposely inject failure into the proxy to understand if we could figure out how to handle it better. So we started to spin up clusters of proxy machines and then gracefully fail them, but also fail them ungracefully and see what the different impact was. And we could do this on our staging environment, so it was way safer than having to do it on production. It's a great way to learn about what's going on. We then could try and implement more monitoring and observability to understand what was actually happening with this proxy as it was handling all of these different queries. That enabled us to actually figure out how we could fix some of the issues, some of the rumbling. We implemented those fixes, a lot of things around how we could more gracefully shut down the proxy and spin up new proxies, how we could actually spin up new proxies, large numbers of them at a really fast, quick speed and handle queries well. We then took all our learnings from staging and put them into production, and we stopped a lot of the rumbling. That then gave us time to be able to figure out how we could migrate away from this proxy and actually decommission it over time. But definitely a big horror story. SQLAlchemy, something that you've probably heard of as well if you work with databases. Something I'd never really used that much over the years because I would just write SQL myself when I'm interacting with a database. But a lot of developers, especially application engineers, product engineers, like to use tools like SQLAlchemy because it makes it easier to be able to interact with the database. But we had to upgrade SQLAlchemy. This is actually a horror story in itself. Just having to upgrade that, who is going to volunteer to take on that project? That has to be a very brave engineer that wants to do that upgrade when you've got, thousands and thousands of lines of code in your database that you need to go and check to see that it still works once you do the upgrade. That's the big thing there, right? You've got one version, you need to then upgrade to another version and make sure that all of the queries still work that you previously created with SQLAlchemy. That's a huge project. This is something that made all of us look at each other with fear in our eyes when we first heard that we need to do this. We started to think and talk about how could we do this safely? How could we gradually roll this out? How could we test and make sure that we were confident that we were doing the right thing? Would we uncover something along the way? What would try to trip us up? How could we be careful up front so that we didn't get hit by different traps along the way? We embarked on this epic journey filled with dark corners and spooky situations. It definitely wasn't what I would call fun. It was really hard, and we had to painstakingly go through every day and check to make sure that we were doing the right work. we had a lot of great people review the PRs, review the code to make sure that everything looked good. And we would check before and after to make sure that we were doing a great job. We did do it successfully, but it took us an eternity, and we finally defeated the SQLAlchemy upgrade. Definitely a horror story situation, not something that I would wish on a friend. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And now I would love to take questions. Thank you.
Tammy, thank you for that. That was really interesting. I think we've all had our share of those kind of experiences. I remember back when I started web development about 11 years ago, I also lost, I was designing a database schema, and once it was all done, I lost it.
Oh, no.
And so I had to really rework it from scratch.
Yeah, that's the worst. There's so many horror stories, right, of schema migrations, like just so many horrible stories related to databases. I know some good stories too, but today's all about the bad ones.
Yeah. So let's see if we get some questions right now.
And hi to everyone in the chat. It's great to see all of your posts.
Yeah, we have viewers joining from what seems like Japan, India, Nicaragua, the US. So welcome, everyone. And if you don't have questions, I'd like to thank you, Tammy.
Yep, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Daniel. Have a great day.
Pleasure. Have a good one.
Bye.